Hello, Mordarim here. In today's video I want to show you the classic Pinnacle of Pulverize build with a fresh layer of paint, utilizing a bunch of things introduced in the past seasons. If that's not already obvious enough, this build focuses on the big, brawly Werebear crushing enemies with his massive bare arms. Pulverize is the obvious choice for this build, giving us what we desire. A big mighty skill to beat our foes. The playstyle of this build consists of alternating between Stormstrike and Pulverize to constantly shift back and forth, which in turn allows us to use multiple passives and glyphs to boost our damage and survivability. The best thing about this bad boy are its insanely high overpower crits, which delete bosses in an instant. Now remember to check out the written guide on Mobalytics. It provides you with a detailed section for each topic explaining how to bolster your defenses, how to scale your damage, and how to transition into different phases. You also have multiple tabs for level brackets, which will come with additional notes and aspects as well as stat recommendations. So Season 4 changed quite a bit, which made the early game as well as the end game of this build much more enjoyable, namely spirit per second and attack speed being much more widely available. You can also find an insatiable fury during leveling, which is also an insane boost in power to this build during the leveling process. Now the main strength of this build is its AoE and devastating single target damage despite being pulverized. Admittedly, the boss DPS can be a little bit lacking because we are using Pulverize. That is always the case with this kind of build, but if the stars align you can delete bosses instantly. Now the basic idea is alternating between a Storm and an Earth skill, which is also a Werebear skill, to constantly shapeshift and get multiple damage buffs each time you use Pulverize. The Shapeshifter glyph gives us a 25% chance to crit on using a Shapeshift ability, which rolls on a different instance than the regular crit chance you already have. Next we apply the aspect of the Ursine Horror to convert Pulverize to an Earth skill. This in turn allows us to scale Earth skill boni like through the aspect of Natural Balance or Resonance, which we proc through Stormstrike. We further boost our damage by utilizing Overpower as an additional multiplier. This is achieved through the Banished Lord's Talisman and multiple ways to proc Overpower through Pulverize, all of which result in massive crits. And we also get new boots, the Wildheart Hunger Boots, which provide us with another great more multiplier. And lastly we are stacking defenses like Armor, Resistances, Max Life and Fortified, combined with a lot of DR, which is now much rarer than it used to be, but at the same time also more powerful because they rebalance the game around this. Now this allows us to feel basically nothing. We are a steel bear. The playstyle is very enjoyable and allows for a ton of mistakes. This build is basically made for new players. You don't have to worry about instant death looming behind every corner, and you can clear all content comfortably. This will also be the build that the game provides you with a starter set throughout the leveling experience of the season. Now if you like what I do and want to support me, make sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you have not already. I cover all sorts of RPGs, be it strategy, C or ARPG on this channel in form of extensive guides. So thank you very much for supporting me and let's dive into the meat. So let's first go over the planner. You have multiple sections. First up is the leveling section, then you have the 70 to 100 unique section and the Uber endgame section. Each section comes with a different set of aspects and uniques you have access to during the leveling process, for example, or during the transition section or during the Uber section. Down below you have sections for each topic, like for example the Spirit Boons and Acquisition Order, Defense and Resistances, scaling your damage, and leveling, as well as a build list for Season 4. Given this build is very simple and not much changed, I'm going to talk about the leveling section immediately. For this one you need to be aware of that uniques can now drop in World Tier 1 and 2. So for example the Insatiable Fury can drop here. If you find it, slap it on. It's basically the best chest you can obtain. Next up, the game will gradually provide you with specific aspects that you can salvage or gear pieces that are fitting for the character for Pulverize, because that's the seasonal reward. So you will naturally obtain things like Shockwave aspect, the aspect of Retaliation, the aspect of Ursine Horror. So those will always be available to you. So make sure to always update those. The next thing you need to be aware of is that you will constantly change your two-handed weapon. We want the two-handed weapon with this build, and this two-handed weapon will of course provide you with the most benefit to your Shockwave aspect. However, if you find yourself to always exchange your weapon and are tired or don't have the resources to reapply your Shockwave, apply your Shockwave to your Amulet and then remove Retaliation for now. Once you reach the sacred tier, you can apply it again like you see in the talent planner. Before that, during the levels 1 to 50, you can switch this up. I would not advise to delete the accelerating aspect in favor of Retaliation because you want to have more attack speed during leveling. It will feel much better generating your resources and you don't have access to infinite mana or infinite spirit just yet. So the aspect of might will provide you with the spirit per second, as well as your boots with spirit per second. All your gear will have 2 affixes. So the first gear priority affixes you see, so movement speed and spirit, are the ones you want to have. So on the helmet you want to have spirit per second and maximum life. Maximum life will also scale your damage as well as your survivability, because down below you will see in the scaling your damage section there is an overpower section. This explains how overpower works now. Basically, the more life you have above your basic life, so your standard life, and the more fortified life you have, the more damage you deal with an overpower attack. Given we now have little to no ways to actually overpower targets, we are not going to entirely focus on this one. Later on, you want to scale it and make sure that you have ways to overpower targets, which will of course come with Obsidian Slam, as well as the Banished Lord's Talisman and the Pulverize ability. Now on your gloves you want ranks to pulverize and attack speed, because ranks to pulverize are a more multiplier as well as attack speed, helping generate your resources and attack faster. So it's the obvious choice for this one. Natural balance is also very easy to proc, and it's basically a really nice aspect to have. However, it's not required for the build because you don't have the necessary critical strike chance to really benefit from the crit strike damage multiplier you get from this aspect. The crit strike chance on Storm Strike is nice, but this aspect is not that good during the leveling process. Later on it's amazing. On your pants, maximum life and armor. On your boots, movement speed and spirit generation. On your weapon, attack speed and willpower. On your amulet you want to have movement speed as well as ranks to envenom, which will act as a more multiplier if you have a poison target, but you're using poison creeper, so targets should be, at least in single target, always poisoned. So you always benefit from envenom. However, you need to critically strike a target to really benefit from this one. So you might also exchange this one for crit strike chance during leveling. It's not that important which one is on your amulet. For your rings, crit chance and maximum life, both of them. You can alternatively exchange one maximum life for life per hit to get some sustain during leveling. But other than that, you actually don't need to look all that much for a good ring. Once you reach the sacred tier, look for more optimized stuff, but for level 1 to level 50 you don't need to optimize it all that much. The next thing you want to look out for are the spirit boons. Here is a detailed guide how to unlock this one. And first you want to get the Iron Feather in the Eagle Tree, then Obsidian Slam in the Snake Tree, Energize in the Wolf Tree, Wariness in the Deer Tree, and Avian Wrath in the Eagle Tree. Later on, if you are sustained on Spirit, you can exchange Energize for Pack Leaders. On a critical strike you're going to reset Poison Creeper, but it's not all that important. It's basically the same thing. You are not going to benefit for this one all that much. Now once you have your Spirit Boons are transitioning from level 70 to level 71, so basically the next tier, World Tier 4, you want to look at your defenses. There is 2 major things you need to think about here. First on, resistance caps. You need to cap your resistances in the next world tier. This is going to be much harder than in the previous tier because you now have a minus 50 to your resistances instead of a minus 25. But you need to reach this cap, otherwise you're going to get blasted. The next cap is your armor cap, which is now 9,230. This cap translates to 85% total physical reduction versus enemies that are level 100 or higher. So before that, that cap is lower, but that cap is what you want to reach once you are fighting level 100 enemies. Otherwise you get blasted. And then there is damage reduction, so get as much as possible. There is some in your skill tree, some on your Paragon board, and some on your gear, namely your chest, because we're going to use the Insatiable Fury. The Wild Heart Hunger Boots also have damage reduction, so that is also quite nice. And don't forget, your Aspect of Might is also applying a 20% damage reduction once you use your Storm Strike. So don't forget to weave in your Storm Strikes, even if you have your full mana capacity covered through Spirit Regeneration. Now, which brings me to the next point, Spirit Generation. Your Pulverize is going to cost 35 mana, so you technically need to hit an enemy quite a lot of times with your Storm Strike to use your Pulverize. This is a lot of time spent Storm Striking instead of Pulverizing, which we actually want to do. So this can be fixed through 2 things. The Spirit Generation and the Resource Regeneration through the Temper on using a Wrath skill to regenerate primary resource on your rings. We have Hurricane, we constantly spam Hurricane. We have Trample, which we constantly spam. Both are Wrath skills, so we generate additional spirit through those. We have Petrify, which also generates some spirit, not much, but it's enough to spam your Pulverize. So once you transition to level 70 and you have your Wild Heart Hunger Boots, you're only going to have 7 spirit per second available to you. So you need And I repeat, you need to get resource cost reduction at this point. So you have your attack speed, you have your willpower, and as the third stat on your weapon, you want resource cost reduction. This will be around 50 with a greater affix. So you prioritize getting the resource cost reduction, greater affix. Once you have this one, your spirit cost will be around 17. With a little bit of spirit per second, you will be now able to use Storm Strike, then your Pulverize, then your Storm Strike, then again your Pulverize. And sometimes you don't even need to use your Storm Strike and can constantly use Pulverize because you have your Hurricane regeneration, your Trample regeneration, your Petrify regeneration. This should technically be enough to sustain your needs. So the build becomes much smoother at this point. You also get access to the Banished Lord's Talisman, which is a very, very important item to get. For this item, you need to farm Duriel, so the Uber boss that was here for Season 2 and Season 3. This amulet will provide you with a guaranteed overpower after spending 275 primary resource. So it's kind of counterintuitive to lower the pulverize cost because you need more pulverizers to actually proc the overpower. However, our damage is not completely dependent on just overpowers, so it's a nice benefit to this, because once we critically strike and the target is overpowered, we deal insane amounts of damage because we have one-time multiplier because of overpower, additional increases to damage, and another crit strike damage multiplier that is applied once we overpower. This applies to all overpowers. This means not only through the talisman, but also through Pulverize and other means, like for example, Obsidian Slam. So how do we actually scale our damage? Through critical strikes, vulnerable application, overpowers, attack speed, and willpower. Now attack speed scales to 100% now, so the cap is 100%. You have attack speed modifiers on your weapon, on your rings, and on your gloves. It is technically enough to grab one attack speed modifier on your gloves and one attack speed modifier on your weapon to get this cap once you start masterworking. Later on, you will grab the Inner Beast node, which will reduce your spirit cost even more. And you will be able to masterwork your spirit per second on your helmet to 12 per second, which should be enough to completely negate any spirit costs. And we are only going to use Storm Strike for the damage reduction buff. So that's 35% damage reduction, which brings me to the Uber set, because in the Uber set we have Harlequin's Crest, which is 20% damage reduction as well as 4 ranks to our skills. So we get a ton of health, we get a ton of stats, we get a ton of ranks to our skills and damage reduction, and we are not as reliant to proc actually Storm Strike and can just go blasting with just this. However, because we don't have the spirit generation anymore, we don't actually regenerate any spirit without Storm Strike and using our abilities. So you technically still use your Storm Strike, and it's a net positive in the DPS because you have the ranks to skills. But if you prefer the spirit generation through your spirit per second and don't have a Harlequin Crest, because this one is quite hard to get, you don't actually need it. It's a minor increase to your performance. Also, you cannot masterwork this one, and imagine this, getting a greater affix on Harlequin Crest on the maximum life roll is going to be very, very tough, and it's much easier to have this one on your regular helmet, so you will have more health with the regular helmet. And another thing that's really important, your resistances. You need to use a defensive temper on this one for fire resistance or any resistance, and then slot in some gems. You don't have any other ones, so you need to sacrifice something. For example, here is maximum life. You can sacrifice this one, but I like the stun chance, so it's a tough decision what you want to have on the build. I personally think most of you will not have a Harlequin Crest, so the regular build is going to be just fine for you. Now let's take a look at the skill tree. For the skill tree, we are going to use our Storm Strike and use Fierce Storm Strike to proc our vulnerable. You have a leveling path for those that are interested in this. So you see exactly for the 50th skill point, you get Cycle of Life. So I'm going to only talk about the major points. Pulverize you're going to get with 5 ranks, and you really want to have Enhanced Pulverize for an overpower every 12 seconds you remain healthy. You have Predatory Instinct for a little bit more crit and damage reduction in Iron Fur. You pick up 15% resistances in the Fortitude tree. We don't have any defensive options here, so we don't pick Vigilance because cannot proc it. Then you pick Poison Creeper, which will provide you with another 20% flat chance to crit with the Poison Creeper. So once you use it and enemies are binded for 2 seconds, you crit them more often. This is just nice to have. You can actually skip this one, take those out, take 1 point here out and pick up 1 point in Mending and 1 point in Provocation to have another instance of power. You can also take out the Enhanced Poison Creeper and boost this one to 2. Then we have Clarity, which is just a minor buff to our damage, We can also take this one out and get the overpower going on provocation. It will take quite a while to ramp this one up because we're constantly shapeshifting back and forth, so it's not that important. Then we pick up Hurricane with Savage Hurricane for less damage taken. So as you can see, we get a ton of damage reductions going on this build. Enemies will deal basically no damage to you. Then we have Safeguard for Fortify generation on a critical strike with an Earth skill. Our Pulverize is an Earth skill. Trample is not, because we don't have the aspect for this one, but we are still going to use it because we can generate 40 Spirit, as well as generate a ton of damage with this one with a 150% multiplier. Then we have Envenom for a more multiplier. We pick up all the points here, so Resonance, Cycle of Life for Heal, Disaster, and Defiance for a more multiplier. We pick up Petrify, 50 Spirit generation with the first upgrade, and second upgrade will reduce the cooldown of this one. Lastly, we pick up Quick Shift because we are constantly shapeshifting into a Werebear, and that's considered a new animal form because we switch to a human then to a Werebear. We get this one quite fast to 18%, which is a nice boost to our damage. The other two are not that worth it because we are not constantly shapeshifting into a werewolf and then into a Werebear, meaning this one is not applicable. And shapeshifting fortifies you for 2% maximum life. I personally prefer this one because you can crit multiple targets, so you can generate your fortify much faster than just shapeshifting, but that's your choice. And then you have Urs in Strength, which is also a massive boost to our performance. We get 20% more health because we are Werebear. And because we are healthy, we deal 25% increased damage and 30% additional more multiplier on overpower damage. So Urs in Strength is extremely good for this build. And lastly, the Paragon board. It's a little bit convoluted, so I'm going to walk you through this one. You have Exploit in the first cluster, in the starter cluster. Then we pick Constricting Tendrils and pick up the Spirit Glyph here because we are critting constantly, so we want to have this one here. Then we go to the next one, which is the Inner Beast node. We grab the node first, then we move all the way down here to the Undaunted node. Then we path all the way to the next board, unlock the board, but we are not going to use anything in the board yet because we're only interested in the thresholds. We're going to go back to the Inner Beast board, and then we are going to path to the Thunderstruck board to unlock the Shapeshifter Glyph. It is very important to get this one going right away before you finish up all the other things in the board. This should be around 75. So once you have your Shapeshifter, you're going to walk back to the Earthen Devastation board and path to the Glyph, which is Outmatch. Then you path to the node, which is Earthen Devastation, which is a more multiplier based on damage to crowd control targets. It is very hard to scale this one because damage to crowd control is so, well, hard to get now. You need to temper it, and it's kind of better to go with close damage instead of earth damage. During leveling you're getting earth damage, but during the end game you want close damage because it's unconditional for bosses. You cannot crowd control the boss, so the more multiply here is kind of wasted because you're losing so much increased damage that it's not worth it. And lastly, we are going to path up here to grab the Ancestral Guidance node and then finish up the rest of the board. So meaning things like the Havoc node, Nimble node, we're going to finish up Determination and so on and so forth. So there is quite a few things you can pick up along the way. Those are for the last 20 levels. You want to get all nodes and all glyphs first and then move on to filling out the tree. Now this sums up the video. If you liked what you saw, make sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you have not already. You can support me some more by joining the channel membership, which will allow me to keep making videos. So thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye!